Well, welcome into another episode of the Puck Drop Podcast. We're doing our PWHL Season 2 preview today, and look who's joining us. We are so happy. It's Becky Kellar, friend of the show. She promised she'd be back, and she is. So to talk over all the happenings and with play less than a week away at this point. So welcome on in, Becky. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It feels like it's September and it's middle to end of November, but you go through training camp and you're getting ready for the start of a hockey season. So I think everybody's pretty excited for this to get going and everyone to hit the ice. And I know I'm
Yeah.
excited.
Yeah, it's that kind of back to school feeling, like
I
uh,
didn't get that excited for back to school.
no, I guess not. But something in the air, just, something
Yeah.
new, get out everything new, all the new jerseys, all the new equipment, new coaches, new arenas, new players. There's so much in the air. So we have a lot to talk about and trying with our goal of, hitting everything and not keeping the viewers for too much more than a half hour. So we're going to watch the clock and hopefully we can get some discussion going in the comments and then um, might have Becky on for a part two where we go a little more in depth. But for right now, let's chat about the roster. The deadlines coming up for contracts and free agents releasing players. We've got some names kind of leaking out as far as maybe having made the team and that kind of thing, but it won't be official until Wednesday, the 27th. And what's that like from a player's point of view to be in that kind of not knowing there were some invited players and some draft picks that weren't signed, and from a management point of view, it's tricky as well.
Yeah, it's a stressful time of year as an athlete when especially if you're the one that isn't sure if you're going to make the team or not. It's pretty stressful. You certainly lose a lot of sleep. I got to say, any year on Team Canada where I wasn't sure, I would go a couple nights without a whole lot of sleep. Pretty restless. So it's tough from that perspective. It's tough for the players too who know that they're going to be on the team because you do become close to your teammates. And so it's hard to see some of them go through it and then potentially be cut from a team. And then from the other side of it, I've done it as a coach, and there's no harder thing to do than to talk to a player, call a player face to face with a player, and tell them that they're unsuccessful. It's a great feeling when you can tell them they've been successful. So there's that side of it as well. But this is sports, and this is what we wanted. We wanted a women's pro league, and this is what comes with it. It's the brutal side of sports too, right? But I mean, the good news is there's such depth in women's hockey that it makes those decisions hard. And again, so it's both sides of it.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say even for the returning players or they know they're signed and those are their friends and there might be some movement. We saw a little bit last year, just I would say the bottom of the rosters, so to speak, and then this season with the elevation of talent, some teams had to invite players that were signed last year back as just free agent, and they, like you said, they played last year. They might not make the squads this year. And the talent level overall is just elevated. So let's talk a little bit about that with the draft players coming in. What are you seeing as far as NCAA and European players joining the teams and how the talent's going to be this upcoming season?
Well, it's incredible depth. And I think that's the big thing. And, if you're a fan of the NHL, you watch them draft players and they draft them at 18 years old. And rarely do they come in and make an impact. And quite often they go back to junior or they go to the AHL. This situation, you're drafting 23-year-olds, sometimes a little bit older. Some of the European players that were under contract last year and couldn't come over. And so you are drafting players that are ready to step in and make an impact right away. And so we're seeing players come in that are going to be first and second line, that are going to be first and second D pairing. And so it is difficult. And you're right that there's going to be players that played all 24 games last year that won't be able to make a roster this year because of the talent. And, you got I mean, every team has picked up at least one player that's going to step in and make an impact right away.
Yeah, the first round draft picks, obviously, I think everyone is going to be key as soon as Kayla Barnes comes back from injury. And then, even into the third round, you've got really interesting players like Nora Toulouse, Izzy Daniel, people like that. So we're going to take a closer look at the rosters once those get constructed. But yeah, I know you were at a couple of the mini camp games here in Toronto. Did anything catch your eye just as far as team dynamics? Are you just learning the players, names and numbers at this point, or scouting? What are you doing at those games that you were attending?
A little bit of that. I mean, it's a lot easier to be able to call a game when you recognize the players just based on look, and you don't have to match a name to a number that you've memorized off a sheet. And so that's a big part of it to go, and then to try to see what some of these players' tendencies are and formulate your own opinion. You can read about how they were in the NCAA, but you want to kind of formulate your own opinion as to how they play in the PWHL. And so, yeah, there was definitely a few things that stood out. Like you said, I was at the Toronto camp, so I saw Toronto, Minnesota, and New York. The Fillier Carpenter combination's pretty intriguing. I was impressed with Izzy Daniel. She was on line with Daryl Watts and
Yeah.
Victoria Bach, and I thought, what a great line in terms of the way that they play the game. So I'm curious to see, if that line stays and how that progresses. Claire Thompson coming back into the league. She hadn't played it all last season, and I think she's, shake the rust off the skates and she'll make an impact right away. Britta Curl on that team as well stood out a number of times with her talent. And so I think it was impressive to watch some of these players and again to really see them live and start to get your own opinion on them.
All these roster decisions based on who you keep or who you might release then sort of have an effect on where players are placed. And there's so much we could say about that, but we'll wait and see for most of that. So then, television rights or broadcasts were announced, at least for Canada, and I know you're going to be a big part of that. So the games will be on TSN and CBC and Amazon Prime. We don't know the US yet, but we're assuming similar to last season with the regional networks and possibly YouTube. But what can you tell us about your schedule, doing the calls with Daniela Ponticelli? I think for the most part you were paired up. What games are you doing and looking forward to?
Well, all of them. November
Oh,
30th start. I'm looking forward to the first game, but I've got 27 games, so all in the Canadian market. So it's almost split a third, and a third between Ottawa and Montreal and Toronto. And then I've got the Quebec City game as well. So yeah, just excited to get started. Worked with Daniela all last year and we had a lot of fun together. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
great. I mean, it's a great pair, and you guys have really good chemistry. We really appreciate all the work that you put in to make those games, just full of information. Behind the scenes note, I always have my headphones on at the game, like listening, because they're just little things that, maybe I'm watching and I don't see. So I really appreciate that. And or going back and watching it later to make some notes on what you said. So speaking of Quebec City, let's take a look at the Takeover Games. There are a lot of them this year. And we mentioned they might be cities that the league is looking at for expansion. What do you see when you look at the schedule of those games? What catches your eye?
Well, it's a great blend, right? You've got the West Coast teams, you're back in Detroit, which should be exciting. They did a great job last year. I was fortunate enough to be at that game and calling that one. Buffalo, I think, is an interesting market. It's similar to Detroit, too, in that you're going to attract American fans, but it's so easy for the Canadian fans to cross the border. I think you'll see that at the Buffalo game. And then the various Canadian markets. And you and I have already been talking about the fact that those games are sold out already or close to sold out. And so hopefully, the American locations are going to have the same success. But so that's going to be kind of exciting. And it's got to be exciting for the players, too, to step on the ice in those venues in the NHL arenas to a packed crowd. So yeah, I like the locations that they've selected. It'll be interesting to see if one of those ones are the ones selected then when they expand in a couple of years or in another year.
Yeah, and the game in Edmonton was sort of added a little bit late, so that's going to be a great one. A bit of a homecoming there for Danielle Serdachny when Toronto plays Ottawa out there in Edmonton. The Quebec City is Ottawa against Montreal. Always just a great matchup. I mentioned that Montreal is going to take a little West Coast swing because they're playing in Seattle, Vancouver, and Denver. So they get to kind of do that time change and go out there for some games. And we didn't necessarily think, we can't say, but this might be just testing the waters for those Western US cities, do you think?
Yeah, I would think that you're probably not expanding out west initially, would be my guess. And again, that's just, my own take on it. But the potentially down the road, what you'd want to see is them put an entire division out there. So it wouldn't be one or two teams, and then everybody's got to travel to them. But if you had a Western division, then obviously their travel would be limited, and then you'd have a little bit of crossover.
Right.
Country, but I would think that one's from further down the road. But you want to be testing things out so you have an idea of what 5 years down the road looks like and 10 years down the road looks like. So I would think that's for the future, but who knows?
Yeah, who knows? They might be swept away by how the reaction is. And I'm sure we'll see further expansion down the road. So, if your city's not selected, there are only two, and there are a lot of guesses. Did you have a guess or an idea or who you'd like to see for the expansion? I mean, I put mine out there as Halifax and Chicago. I don't know. Maybe, yeah, those are my picks. I don't know. I'm just going to stick with it.
Yeah, I'm going to guess that because they haven't picked those two cities for any of these games, that they may not be on the short list.
That's true.
Detroit, this is their second game. Great market, and I think again with Detroit, the fact that they're right on the border, so you're getting both the Canadian side and the American side. I would think that would be one of their first choices. After that, I'm not 100% sure. Where they go if they try to remain in Canada, if they pick two U.S. cities. It'll be difficult to say, but I do like the idea of Halifax, though. I think, it's a great hockey town
Yeah.
and played a world championships there, and it was just fantastic. So I think it'd be a great location.
Yeah, yeah, sort of have a soft spot for the maritime cities, but we'll see. But yeah, you're right. I think Detroit might have the best odds, but we'll see. And then speaking of the schedule, I mean, you know this from playing with Team Canada. So the World Championships are going to cut into the schedule, the rivalry series as well, and then this new, I guess, Six Nations. So it's going to end up being three, maybe week-long breaks during the season. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think the international competition is still really important. And you've got the Six Nations, which Canada's sending their development team. Sure, but the US, I would imagine they are too. So it's not going to be grueling for the Canadian and American players in the league. And then when rivalry breaks, it's the same thing for your European players. So I think it's probably a good thing that you're not losing players to each of those competitions, because it gets to be a lot on the players between the travel and
Yeah.
just the work on their body. But yeah, I think the international side is still really important in women's hockey. I love the fact that with the Six Nations, you start to see the international teams. You're seeing so many of their players in the PWHL, and so I think you're going to start to really see those national teams to really vie for the gold and silver medals.
Yeah, yeah, really looking forward to that one. And that's in Czechia, isn't it? In
Yeah, I believe so.
in December. Yeah. So that'll be worth taking a pause and just seeing some of those national team players and the crossover. It's getting really interesting. There's a little more crossover between American and Canadian players on American and Canadian teams, and then bringing in some of the European players. We've talked with some of the friends from the SDHL that are on different teams now. All of that just is making it such an interesting mix. Did you ever play uh game and I'm sure you did, but like what was that like playing against your friends when you were in like league action or other games? Was that interesting and or difficult?
Never difficult. I think it was probably more fun than anything. My college roommate was Katie King, who is now the
Oh,
head coach at Boston College.
yeah.
So a great friend. We played on the softball team together too, and then turned around and played respectively for our national teams, Canada and the US. And she's a forward. Of course, I'm a D. So we had some epic battles on the ice. But we were always able to leave it on the ice. And I think, one of the things when we beat them in 2002 in the Olympic final and probably weren't supposed to, and I wasn't sure, how she was going to be because they should have won. They beat us all year. And the first time I saw her, after that, she's like, "Hey, let's get a picture. We were decked out in our stuff. Let's get a picture with our medals." And so I thought, yeah, this is how it should be, right? And it's I think how most of these women would approach it too, which is you've got your college teammates that you're now playing against, you got your international teammates you're playing against, and they're great battles. You know their strengths and weaknesses. You leave it on the ice, and you always leave it on the ice. And Kinger and I went to each other's weddings, and our parents used to vacation together.
Oh,
So, it's just we used to call them the enemy affectionately. My parents called them the enemy, and vice versa. So, yeah, it's just how it is, right? And that's the great side of sport.
yeah, it really is. And it's nice, it's nice that it's not that there is that crossover because you can see the players kind of that know each other on opposite sides. We had both Ronya Savalainen on. I had Nora Toulouse and Daniela Peshova, the Lulia three, who were all great friends, especially Ronya and Nora. And they both said they were going to laugh, and Ronya thought she might give Nora a little bump. And so those things are just fun to watch. I mean, like you
Yeah.
said, that's what makes sports, and it's all done with affection, but it's also, 3 points are on the line.
Oh yeah.
Um, so
You're
yeah,
you're competing like you want to win, and you don't play them any differently than anybody else. But like I said, when the game's over, the game's over.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So let's talk quickly here about the this new no escape rule for yourself as a penalty killer. You're familiar with that. So imagine you're out on the ice, the ref's arm goes up, and you look, and it's your D partner, Cheryl, or somebody who took the penalty,
Probably Cheryl.
and you're thinking, oh no, okay, a defensive defender is going off the ice, and three forwards are staying out with me on the ice, and these three are our scoring line or something like that. And so that's what the rule is, to trap those players on the ice at least until the puck drops. And then we did see in minicamp a couple of goals actually result from that. So is that your understanding of like what it would feel like, and what do you think of that rule?
Yeah, well, I think it's there to create more offense on the power play, and I like it, and I like that they can be innovative in this league. It's a brand new league. We saw it last year with the jailbreak, and these are hard things that I think if you're in the NHL, it's hard to implement a new rule like this because you've got over 100 years of tradition, and you've got fans that are purists, and that's not the case necessarily in this league because it's brand new. So you are able to do stuff like this. I like this rule. I think it's going to help create offense on the power play. It's going to change the way you coach your team. So I think, if it were me and I'm structuring my team, I'm going to have one player on every line who practices the penalty kill as a defender.
Mm.
Just so that if you're the line that's out there when a D gets penalty, you know which player's going back. That player's familiar with what their role is back there. But certainly there are players that are better penalty killers than others, and those players could be on the bench. And again, that's the point. That is to take advantage of that. So I'm interested to see how it plays out. I think the other side of it too is if it's your center that gets a penalty, and you better have someone else out there that can take a face off, or at least tie up or have a plan for it, because
Yeah.
that's a big opportunity in a penalty kill is to win the draw, get the puck down the ice, and then get your change.
Yeah, yourself as a coach, you'd have to examine all the ins and outs of, like you just said, that's a good point. You might have somebody in each line that at least if and when a D goes off, they know it's on them. Do you think this affects the jailbreak because now you can't, we think of Emma Malte or players like that who's kind of can specialize in that role a little bit of going out on the PK and having the speed and smarts to possibly get the jailbreak. And now, she might be on the bench more. Do you think it's a bit of a trade-off there?
I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out because, again, if you're stuck with three forwards on the ice, are they more likely to think offensively? And if they get an opportunity, they go. Um,
Mm-hmm.
this is one of those things that I feel like we're going to speculate how it's going to turn out. We may all kind of be surprised, but definitely you're right in that your top penalty killers could potentially be on the bench. So someone like Emma, who's a good penalty killer because of her speed, because of the reads that she makes on the ice, and then she's able to recognize when she should go on offense. And not everybody has that skill set.
Mm.
So you may see less jailbreak goals. I think maybe what you'll see is that the puck's going to drop. If you get a hold of the puck as the defending team, I think your first priority is to get off. And
Yeah.
so instead of going on offense, you're just going to get the puck down the ice and get your change in.
Right. Yeah.
Again, see how it
Yeah.
plays out.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see in the flow of the game, and depending on the score and those things, how it's done. I'm sure the coaches are going down every rabbit hole of possibilities. So just makes it more interesting. I mean, what a fun league to watch, and imagine, I don't know if there's some empty net scenario with the jailbreak and with the no escape or something like that. Just so many things that could happen. So we are going to do team by team, but just quickly, I wanted to get your opinion on a couple of players that to me are noteworthy, and people won't know why, but I'm going to mention Megan Carter from the Toronto Scepters, who is unfortunately starting this season on the IR. And can you tell us why that's a little special for yourself? Maybe.
Well, Megan came to our hockey school, Cheryl Pounder and I, for years and years. In fact, she came past a point where, I mean, she was always the best player, but when you're 10 years old, there's going to be players older. She came to the point where, I mean, she was so far by far and away better than the rest of the players. It may not have been the right fit. So we appreciated that she still came to us for that training. So we've known her for a long, long time. And really excited to see her in this league. Kind of had followed what she was doing in the NCAA. And I think with a player like that too, it's the academics. And so if you do a little Google search on Megan Carter, like, yes, she is a fantastic hockey player, but she's an intellectual as well. And so it'll be interesting to see sort of what route her career takes after hockey, because she's got that side of her as well. I believe she wanted to be a doctor. So she won't be the first one in the league with Claire Thompson doing it, and Haley
Yeah,
Wickenham, of
yeah,
course, is a doctor now. But it's always nice to see those players that are so well rounded like that, and they have that side of them too. So yeah, pretty excited to see her hopefully get back and healthy and be in the lineup soon.
yeah, yeah. I mean, she has been skating, and from what I can see, and I hope this isn't a scoop for any other teams that are scouting, but she looks pretty good. I mean, it was hard for me to tell what her injury might be. Of course, they're not saying, but both she and Spooner have been skating after practice, and we know Spooner is got a little more ways to go to make sure she's completely safe in that knee rehab. But yeah, Megan was looking pretty good. So and we're hearing that maybe Toronto might cut a defender that we didn't think they would. People were reading a lot into that maybe Megan is closer. But the other one I wanted to get your opinion on is, of course, Sarah Fillier. You mentioned her with Alex Carpenter, but she is just a special talent. I don't know if it's like a Connor Bedard scenario where it's like, well, duh, she's going to be the rookie of the year. Are you getting that impression?
I don't know if I'd make that prediction right now, given the other players that have come into this league. And you watch Serdachny and her
Mm,
training camp games and the talent that she brings, and Bilka Barnes, so,
that's
there's so
true.
many that have come into this league. I think with all of the rookies coming in, the biggest thing will be, how do they adapt? It's not the same hockey as international or NCAA, right? With the contact and the physicality. And so how do those players adapt? It's harder for some players than others, right? You get a Serdachny who's bigger body, strong down low. It might be an easier change for her to figure that out, whereas Affiliate is more skilled. So it might take her a little longer. So,
That's
and again, yet to be determined, because it did take some players some time last year. We saw that with Taylor Heisey, where I feel like she really came into her own in playoffs, and that's kind of where it clicked. And it's like, okay, I can manage the way this game is played now. So who knows? I was very intrigued by Fillier on that line with Carpenter, though, because there you've got
mhm.
two highly skilled players with really high hockey IQ, and so I'm really excited just to see how they find each other on the ice.
Yeah, yeah. It was a pretty dangerous combination. Of course, she got a hat trick in the second game where it looked like she was feeling better. I think, scoop, she might have had a cold or something going on that was keeping her from feeling 100%. So it was like, oh, maybe she maybe she's feeling a little better. And
Right.
of course, she deflected and just said, it was nice for our line to get some goals. So I guess those are the players that I wanted to get a quick observation on because you know them. And yeah, Sir Dackney might have a say in the Rookie of the Year. I think, someone could surprise us. Maybe a defender really breaks out. Someone like Kayla Barnes or even a Peshova. Those, if those players have a big impact on their teams. But I think those are the major storylines that we just wanted to touch on as we get into this, you know, roster creation week here. And we're going to be watching and posting about that. And you're going to be drinking your tea and honey and making sure you stay rested before your busy schedule gets started. So we really appreciate you taking the time, and hopefully, as I said, we'll have you back on soon once the rosters are announced.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Can't wait to get started.
Yeah, same. All right. Thank you so much, Becky.
No problem.